don't know what it is about adults like myself being so enamored with miniatures. You know, those little cars, buildings, and people with the little trains on tracks actively making their way through the realistic, perfectly to scale settings. Aside from my childhood toys, the first time something like this ever captivated me was on a trip to Brussels, Belgium. Being the headquarters of the European Union, they have Mini Europe, a collection of buildings and settings from the various countries in the European Union. The detail and accuracy were incredible. Next was here in Ontario. On a road trip out to St. Jacobs in the Waterloo region, we checked out the St. Jacobs and Aberfoyle Model Railway. Again, the attention to detail, impeccable. I mean, you simply just get lost in the environment that these people create. Plus, the high childlike excitement instantly brings you back to happier times. So, when I discovered that Toronto, my city, has Little Canada, I immediately felt that familiar childlike rush come over me again. I gotta visit this place. Hey, welcome to episode 1 of Highway Highlights, a podcast that takes all the raw, unedited interviews and inspirational stories found all across the Rudderless Media YouTube channel. My name is Christopher Rudder, a road trip, day trip, and all-around travel expert in this here travel space. In this episode, we head over to Little Canada and sit down with Jean-Louis, founder and chief visionary officer, to discover the story and inspiration behind Little Canada. We find out what he hopes the visitors take away from their experience besides getting to be a kid again. We'll also speak with Mark, director of destinations, to unlock the behind-the-scenes secrets to making the displays so immersive. So let's dive into Little Canada and see what this place is all about.
So it goes basically back to 1999.
Okay.
When I first came to Canada. I was only supposed to come for 2 years. And I never knew anything about the country. I could name 2 people, Brian Mulroney and Pierre Trudeau. Why? Because I would read The Economist magazine in Europe. And when there was an election in Canada, there would be a small article at the time.
Jean-Louis was born in the UK to Dutch parents. He went to school and worked in 5 countries before being drafted into the Dutch army. But Jean-Louis said that they didn't want him, so he left. With a background in retail, Jean-Louis, his wife, and their newborn son came to Canada to learn specialty retail. After about 9 years, he switched from retail and got into renewable energy. But in 2010, he was invited back to Europe to work in the private equity space.
And what I noticed during that short period of time, 2 things. One is I didn't like the work and I didn't like the people. Why? Because it was pure money driven.
Yeah, fair.
And I'm a people person. I'm not a money person.
Okay. So with that, he quit, came home, told his wife that they were not going back to London, to which she was ecstatic.
And within a couple of weeks, my wife said to me, why don't you open those boxes that you've packed in Belgium? And so that's what I did. I unpacked those boxes, and in those boxes was my train set. Part of it was inherited from my father because my father passed it down to me.
Right.
And the bug started to come back.
Okay.
On the one hand, I was really excited because I couldn't quite remember everything in the boxes. Some of it I knew, but I wasn't quite sure. So there was a excitement in revealing and opening the boxes and unpacking the trains and the locomotives, but even some of the structures that I made, the towns, things like that. And that really started me thinking about wanting to visit this place in Hamburg, Germany called Miniature Wonderland.
Hey.
It's the largest model train layout in the world, and it opened in 2000. I always wanted to go and visit this place. And I had agreed with a cousin of mine, Michael, who is a model train collector. He doesn't actually have a layout, but he collects trains, model trains. And he and I agreed that in April, we would go there together. So between January and April of 2011, I started to dream. Wouldn't it be cool if I did something like this myself? And I said to myself, that can't be, it's ridiculous. There's no way I would ever be able to do something like that. But the other thing that inspired me was everything about Canada. Because when I came to Canada, I never heard of Wayne Gretzky.
Okay.
I never heard of Terry Fox. I thought that basketball was invented by an American. And it wasn't until 2010 at the Winter Olympics, at the closing ceremony, when William Shatner came on stage, I said, what? Captain Kirk of Star Enterprise is Canadian? And the list goes on. Even today, I discover individuals' history about Canada that I made the wrong assumption about. I always assumed that everything was American. And that's not the case. And in fact, Canada is a very rich country in terms of its history, its landscape, its people. And Canadians are very reserved. They don't like to boast. And Canada has a lot to offer, a lot to celebrate. And that was really the other inspiration for me wanting to do this, is really to have every guest come through and walk out and saying, you know what, I learned something about this country that I did not know before.
You're right. Just from doing this, like, I learned so much already. Or it's, for me, it's because when I see stuff, I'm like a big kid. So when I see stuff, I immediately go into childhood, and then I love it. But what's also amazing for me is that when you visit a lot of these places, like I've been to Quebec, I've been to Newfoundland, then you see those things recreated. It just makes me feel like that's it. Like it looks exactly like that. Like that's all. So it really brings this joy. So that's fantastic.
So being inspired by Canada makes sense, but how do they get all these things to scale? So let's bring Mark into this conversation.
So how do you measure the buildings? Because I mean, you're not walking around with a measuring tape going to, the Parliament building and measuring it. So how do you measure it and get it from that size to scale to present it on display over here? Like, you have blueprints, like, how does that work? That's the first question.
Yeah, it depends on the building. And like you said, sometimes we are able to get drawings of the actual buildings from agreements that we have with those areas. Parliament, as an example, we actually got some of the drawings for the Parliament building. We're able to use those to create the miniatures from them. But most of the time we don't get that. And so the easiest way is actually just using, the internet, Google Maps and everything, Google Street View. You can take measurements on everything. So you take that and you're able to get it close enough to the point where you can get it that it resembles the building. Our job is not necessarily to make the exact replica of the exact building. If it's a foot off here or there, it's not going to be a big deal for us. So we're able to get enough information out of stuff like that to build them.
What's that process like? Like I saw somebody gluing branches, like little pieces of things on, and straight up, I don't have the patience for that kind of stuff. And then you're saying people are hand painting each fish. Like what's the deal with all that?
Yeah, I mean, we create everything, so everything, almost everything that you see here is created in-house. So we really just have to figure it out. And so sometimes it's as simple as taking a tree and taking the leaves and gluing it on. Sometimes it takes a lot of design work on a computer, and then it's 3D printed or it's laser cut and assembled together again. The structures is sort of a very interesting thing because it's a combination of a lot of different things. You take these flat pieces of plastic and you design them and you cut them in certain ways, and then you put them back together again, almost like a puzzle you create for yourself.
Awesome.
To make this unique one-of-a-kind building. These buildings aren't something that you can buy in a box. We make everything that is here. So it really is just finding, efficient ways of creating these one-off intricate little pieces. Takes a lot of patience, like you said. a lot of research and just sort of, it's a developed skill though. You don't really go to school for model making. I mean, you can, but we have people from all different kind of aspects of work here.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, what kind of people are on your team?
Yeah. So we have civil engineers, we have architects, we have mechanical people, we have visual arts people who come from theater backgrounds, people who come from, makeup backgrounds. So really kind of any sort of artistic space, it translates into miniatures. And you might not see it at first, but I'm telling you, if you have an artistic bone in your body, you'd be able to make a miniature.
Yeah. You could definitely see that, because like when you walk by the theaters in Stratford, you hear people cheering and people are actually doing a play. Like you hear these little things that are going on that really, like it's awakening like all your senses, which is actually
and it's beyond just the physical making of things. Sometimes it's creating the stories and creating the little elements of people. People come up with these like silly ideas and you put it in the display, 1 in 10 people see it, but that one person's going to see that thing and laugh or smile or whatever it is. And it just makes it, that's what makes it kind of special, having all these fine little detail scenes around the vine.
One of the most touching parts of Little Canada is its tribute to the Highway of Heroes. Now, for those that don't know, the Highway of Heroes is a portion of our highway, the Highway 401, between Trenton and Toronto. And it's a route that's traveled by funeral convoys for fallen Canadian Forces personnel from CFB Trenton to the coroner's office. Now, as that convoy passes through the various cities and towns along that route, locals will gather on the bridges and the overpasses, waving their Canadian flags just to show respect to the fallen soldier and their families.
What was the inspiration specifically around the Highway of Heroes? Because that was just so touching for me when I saw that.
So the Highway of Heroes is really a special project for me, because it really resonates, because it's something that I did not expect. I've lived in 6 countries, 2 of which celebrate, as it were, Remembrance Day in a very unique way. And that is by actually wearing the poppy.
Right.
So that's the UK and Canada. And I have to say the Canadian poppy is much nicer. And when I was confronted with the first Afghan soldier coming home from the war being flown into CFB Trenton and then put into a hearse and then driven along the Highway of Heroes, I realized that, wow, this is fantastic how the population of Canada rallies around it, come together and stand on the various viaducts, the bridges along the Highway of Heroes. And that's what I wanted. I said, I need to represent that in our world. And so that's what we ended up doing, which was really exciting. So in discussions with True Patriot Love Foundation, which is a foundation that supports veterans and their families, we decided to represent the Highway of Heroes in our Golden Horseshoe exhibit. And we ended up even naming the bridge itself to a fallen soldier, which is actually what, in reality, that's what happens. So in this case, the question was, well, which soldier do we pick?
Mm.
And very quickly, my colleague from True Patriot Love Foundation, Namita, said, well, let's take the first female soldier who passed away.
Mm.
And that was Captain Nicola Goddard.
Yeah.
And Namita knew or knows the family. And I sat down and had breakfast with the sister who lived at the time here in Toronto and shared with her the vision of the representation, which included, by the way, having the family literalized and then placed at the foot of the bridge where the plaque is. And so if you go and see it, you'll see them standing under the plaque. And then we unveiled it in November 9th, 2021. We had 60 guests, former veterans and others. and 30 of them decided to get littleized, and they're all on the bridge. My wife and I are on the bridge, as well as since the unveiling, we've had a number of veterans who've visited Little Canada, and we've placed them on the bridge as well, following their request.
Wow, that's so incredible.
Now, another really cool thing about Little Canada is how immersive it is. I mean, from the sounds, from the lights changing from night to day, everything moving around it is very cool. So let's talk to Mark about that.
We saw like fish flapping in a little boat that just got caught. We saw chickens that as soon as it became morning, when it was rotating, they started to move and come to life. Like, so what goes into all of those little pieces? And how do you guys doing that?
We actually have a team called the Animated World Team, and that's their job, is to create things that bring this world to life. And that can be in the form of cars driving on the road. It can be in the form of trains driving on the tracks. It can be in the form of tiny things like the chicken and the fish. And it's their job just to take these tiny little things and make them move in a way that just sparks that awe in people. And people just think, how the heck did you do that? You know, they deal with things with, you know, it's motors and it's electronics and it's programming, and they actually create a lot of those systems. A lot of them are created in-house. Some of them are just purchase things that we can go out to hobby shops and buy and install. But really, it's just a lot of technical knowledge and just developing these things where you come up with an idea of, wouldn't it be cool if there's a boat with fish flopping in it? And these guys take that and go, okay, how do we make that happen?
How are we doing this littleization station, minimization, creation?
So the littleization station is this big dome that's out there, and it just takes a bunch of pictures from you from 360 degrees, and it generates a 3D model of you, whatever you're wearing, you know, whatever your hair looks like that day, and then whatever pose you're standing in, it'll capture that, and then we get it 3D printed. So you can get it 3D printed in multiple different sizes, but the one that relates back to the world is that 3/4 inch size, which is that HO scale that I was talking about earlier. And you can get yourself littleize that size and place yourself somewhere in the world that relates to you. So if I went to school in Ottawa, I'd love to be placed in front of the Parliament buildings. Boom, I'm placed right there with everybody else.
That's very cool.
Now, before we wrap up, I have one final question for Jean-Louis.
So now that you've built this, and I see when we meet you upstairs and people are coming in, I see this little childhood giddiness that you have when you see people coming in to see what you've created. So what do you hope people take away from here when they leave?
Well, first of all, I hope that everyone who comes in enjoys the experience and in a way forgets about reality. It's a moment to just unwind, enjoy, be entertained, and at the same time, walk out of here having learned something about the country that they did not know about when they walked in. And this is not an education exhibit by no means. It's just indirectly that you will then walk away with, oh, I did not know that Canada had this or that, or represented this or that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first and foremost. Perhaps more deeply is to really walk out of here learning more about the country. So this is kind of like a facilitator to, oh, I'd like to know more about this, or I'd like to know more about that. Or, wow, I've never been to Quebec City. We should go and visit Quebec City. Never been to Ottawa. Oh, should go and visit Ottawa. That's what I would like this to be. Want to make a difference in the lives of everyone who we touch, who come here, who then for an hour and a half or 2 hours just figure about reality, figure about their challenges in life, and just enjoy and be entertained.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode or watching it if you were joining us on YouTube, which is also very cool. Now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to be notified of when the next episode is released. And, in the comments, hey, if you visited Little Canada or something like that, or, you've been to Toronto lately, or just want to leave a comment about the video, please leave a comment. We love reading it and we love writing back. So until the next episode, take care of yourself. Cheers.